Hello, I'm Robert, and you're welcome here in my busy little shop. On today's episode of What's My Workbench, we're going to do a beginner project. Now, we're going to make a holster for this revolver, and you're going to think, how's that a beginner project? Well, this is a fairly simple build, and you can use this same style of holster for other things, cell phones, knives, and such. So let's get over here on the workbench. I'll show you how we're going to lay out and make this holster today. Appreciate having you in the shop with me. To get started, I created this pattern here, and it's really pretty straightforward. I just started off, we're not going to go through the whole pattern building part of it, but I started off with outlining a pretty good margin here to sew on this side, and then I rolled it over and did the same thing here. Then I get it mocked up here of how it's going to go. And I did a little trimming where I thought I wanted it here around the trigger guard and the hammer, and then lastly the flap that will make up this holster. Once we've created that, we just need to locate that on some leather here. This is some 7-ounce leather that I purchased from Montana Leather not long ago, and it's a piece that most would think is less desirable, but it's got a pretty nice area here left. That's where we're going to cut it out. Probably the biggest challenge here is remember that when this is completed, this is the outside. So you want this side to be the finished side. If you lay it out like this, you've now created it the wrong way. So we need to flip this over here. And then I'm going to sketch this on here with my pencil. You can use pen because you're going to trim off the edge here, but I'm just going to use a pencil here. I've got a softer leaded pencil. Now this holster that we're making will not have a welt. It doesn't need a welt for this style of a holster, but if you want to put one in, by all means, go ahead. But I don't think you really gain anything by putting a welt in here. Now, if you are making some type of a knife sheath out of this, then by all means, you're going to want to put a welt in there. The welt is to protect the threads from the sharp implement. So the only thing that I need to cut out now is going to be the piece of leather that will make the loop on the back side here to attach it to your belt. And I just need a square here that I can put on the back here to run a belt through. And if you make it for a 2-inch belt, then that'll work for most things. The weight of it will carry it down on it, so that's fine. But what you don't want to do is not have room in there. So if I have a 2-inch and I want a 1/4-inch seam allowance around that, I need a 2.5-inch. So I'm just going to cut a 2.5-inch square out of this leather here. So one of the tougher things to do is to get this patch the way you want it so it hangs properly on the belt. So I'm going to lay this in here and form this over. Actually, I can form it over first. I like these little binder clips. They're about a 1/4-inch deep, which shows the seam allowance pretty well. So I've got those clipped on there now. We'll slide this in here. And pretty quickly, we're already starting to see how this is going to come together. And then the flap is going to be like this. Probably be a little further down in once I get it done. Probably about there. What you probably don't want to do is you don't want this flat to the waistline. You want it tipped. So the belt's going to come through like this. And because if you went like this, then the gun would tip forward, and that's not very, I don't think very handy for drawing the revolver out. So I'm going to put it so it's like this. So that will give me my angle on the back. So I'll do the same thing here. So what I'm going to do, I guess, easiest way to describe it is I'm going to square up off of this edge here and hang it like that. Just put a light mark here. Those will erase easy enough. Okay. I need to go ahead and get this sewn on, because once we form this and sew this, it'd be difficult at best to get that sewn on there. Okay, we'll set up over here and sew this together. I'm going to sew this mounting patch on the back of the holster using just a simple saddle stitch, some Tigeritza 0.08 thread. I'll finish off with a square knot between the two layers and a square knot. All right, so we've got the patch on here now for our belt to pass through. And it's gonna go like this. Now this leather, as I said, it's about 8-9 ounce leather. You can go much heavier with this if you wanted. You could go, I suppose you could go with a 16 ounce. It would make a pretty stiff flap here, but you could wet form that flap and it would work fine. If you wanted to add some tooling here, this would be a good place to add tooling here. Also, you could add some detail here if you wanted, so it kind of matched together. But this one here, they just wanted a holster to protect the tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark, I don't want to go too far with my contact adhesive. I'm going to mark where it's going to go to, which is here. And I'm actually going to trim that. And I'm going to come down to here on both sides as well. My seam allowance here, I'm going to have a 1/4 inch outside of my stitch. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to go 3/8 of an inch wide with my contact adhesive around here. And even if I get too far out, it's not going to be a problem because it'll be separated there where that tool's at. It's not going to, it won't impede that removal from there. But one thing I do want to complete is a little bit of edge detail here, because once I get this sewn together, it's going to be harder to get this area here finished. So in looking at this, I think I want to round this down a little bit further here to aid in removing the revolver. I think it'd look better if I did something like that. Curves are a little bit more difficult to cut, so I'm going to cheat. I've got my corner tool here, and I'm just going to use that here. You could use a round punch as well. I'm just going to flip this over to match it. I'm going to use my Ron's number 2, and I'll get the inside of this. And the outside. Okay. Let's set up some contact adhesive here. All right, we've given that ample time to get set up. Let's put these 2 layers together. We can dry fit it now. Oh yeah, I'm liking what I see. Let's go ahead and we'll put in our stitch line here. There we go, over to the stitching pony. Let's get this sewn up here. I'm gonna do the same idea here with a saddle stitch. And I started in here instead of over the edge. My feelings were that if I went over this edge here, that it might put more stress on that and want to tear there. Now, some people might say that it puts more stress to have it here, but to me it seems stronger there. So that's the reason why I'm doing it there. But I am going to match up my stitching to how I'm going to finish. So I'll have 1.5 back stitches here. I'm going to create that same look here at the top, and it'll give it a little more strength there as well. I finished the stitching here, and the other reason why I didn't come around the end here is because I'm going to sand this all together so it's all on one plane, and then I'll do my edge work. If you wanted to stitch around the end here, which you could if you wanted, you would want to get all of your finish work done here on this edge because it'll make it difficult to do it without damaging the threads. So I'm gonna go over to my sander. I'm gonna sand this all smooth, then I'll meet you back over on the workbench. I need some holes for my lace to go through. And I typically like to do this afterwards so that if things get shifted, I can get these holes exactly where I want them for the lacing. This is for the closing mechanism. You could use a snap if you want to use a snap to close it, but I like to do it a little bit differently than that. And I cut a piece of antler here to use for the lacing to go around. So I'm going to sew that on here now. I installed my lacing, but it's a little bit tight pulling through there. So I'm going to put a little bit of tan coat on here, and I'm going to slick down this lace by pulling it through some denim. All right. You can use thread to sew this on, but I've got some artificial sinew that I'm going to use, and I think it'll match the color of the antler tip better. And when you buy the artificial sinew, you can separate it if you want a smaller amount as opposed to the whole one. And I'm going to put a lot of stitches around it, but I think it looks better with a little bit smaller, because by the time I'm done going around it multiple times, it'll have plenty of mass to it. To install this, I'm just going to work from the inside out. I'm going to start with a knot here. Help me hold my place. If you wanted your holster to look a little bit more, I guess, old-fashioned, you could use the artificial sinew to sew this leather together. Now I'm going to run this under this thread, or this sinew where it came out, before I tie a knot to help kind of lock it in place. One more time. And the nice thing about the artificial sinew is you can melt the thread. All right, let's do the finish work on the holster, and we'll come up and oil it, and we'll be back. Go ahead and use my Ron's number 3 edger here. Let's put a little bit of oil on here. So there you go, a simple project for an afternoon. Maybe a holster to build a little bit of confidence towards the more elaborate one that you have in mind. You can see it's very simple, not a lot of supplies. If you don't have antler, you could use a multitude of things, like an old antique brass button. That would look really cool there, especially if the button, came off of something to where it had some meaning to it. But it's easy to do, and as I said earlier, you can pretty simply modify this and make it something totally different. You could make it the size of a cell phone and have it finish the same way with a flap on there, and it would give a different style look to that cell phone case that maybe you're wearing around your waist. I hope this helps you get a little bit confident on holsters. This is a very simple design, obviously. Appreciate having you in the shop with me today. Please like, share, and subscribe. But more importantly, have a great day.